Nestled in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains, Hillside Nature Reserve stood as a sanctuary of untamed beauty. The sprawling 200-acre refuge, established by retired biology professor Margaret Wilkins, had become home to many rescued animals over the years. Among them was Maxine, a striking 4-year-old bobcat with tufted ears and piercing amber eyes. Unlike the wild bobcats that roamed the reserve, Maxine had once been a captive, trapped in deplorable conditions at an illegal exotic pet operation in Tennessee. Malnourished and terrified of humans, she had been confined to a rusty cage barely large enough to turn around. It had taken months of patient rehabilitation for Maxine to regain her health and her instincts. Though she would never be released back into the wild, she had claimed a spacious, naturalistic enclosure at Hillside as her own territory. Maxine's journey of recovery was one of resilience, but an even greater test awaited her, the challenge of motherhood. 6 months prior, the reserve had taken in another rescued bobcat, a young male named Ranger. Found orphaned near a logging site in West Virginia, Ranger had been raised with care, growing into a strong and curious feline. When introduced to Maxine, the two bobcats had been cautious at first, circling each other with wary eyes. But over time, their bond grew, marked by mutual grooming and shared napping spots. By the end of winter, the staff suspected that Maxine was pregnant. Bobcats typically give birth in late spring, so the team expected Maxine's litter to arrive around May or June. However, on an early April morning, something was amiss. Ethan Nolan, a former park ranger and the reserve's lead wildlife specialist, arrived at dawn for his usual rounds. Sipping his coffee, he approached Maxine's enclosure and immediately sensed her agitation. Instead of lounging on her favorite elevated platform, she was pacing near her den box, letting out restless, high-pitched growls. Alarmed, Ethan quickly called Dr. Brian Carter, the 55-year-old veterinarian who oversaw the medical care of Hillside's residents. "I think you'd better come in early," Ethan told him. "She's showing signs of labor." Brian arrived minutes later, his flannel shirt still rumpled from sleep. Together, he and Ethan set up a monitoring station, repositioning cameras and preparing medical supplies in case intervention was necessary. As the morning wore on, the staff gathered anxiously near the enclosure, watching as Maxine went through the grueling process of labor. At precisely 11:14 a.m., the first kitten arrived, a tiny, wet bundle of dark fur. The team collectively held their breath until Maxine began licking her newborn, stimulating its breathing. Relief washed over them when the kitten let out a faint squeak. Over the next hour, 3 more kittens followed, each greeted with the same careful maternal attention. But Maxine wasn't finished yet. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Maxine strained with one final push. The last kitten emerged, but something was wrong. It was noticeably smaller than its siblings, its fur almost translucent. Most concerning of all, it wasn't moving. Brian's experienced eyes narrowed. "We need to intervene. Now." Ethan, who had the closest bond with Maxine, volunteered to approach. Moving cautiously, he murmured reassuring words as he neared the den box. The entire team expected Maxine to react defensively, but instead, she did something astonishing. She stepped aside, her amber eyes watching Ethan with a look of trust. Carefully, he lifted the motionless kitten and hurried it to the veterinary clinic. Under bright examination lights, Brian worked swiftly. Clearing the kitten's airways, administering oxygen, placing it on a warming pad, each second felt like an eternity. Then, just as hope was beginning to fade, the kitten's tiny pink mouth opened in a silent gasp, its chest rising in weak but steady breaths. "We've got signs of life," Brian announced, though his relief was tempered with concern. "But this little one has a tough road ahead." A closer examination revealed the issue. The kitten had a congenital deformity in its jaw and palate, making nursing nearly impossible. Without immediate intervention, it wouldn't survive. The team named the tiny fighter Aspen, after the resilient aspen trees that dotted the reserve. For the next 2 weeks, Aspen was tube-fed every 2 hours, monitored around the clock, and kept in an incubator near Maxine's enclosure. The staff worried about the separation, but to their surprise, Maxine frequently approached the barrier, chirping softly as if calling for her missing offspring. Recognizing the maternal bond, the team devised a plan. With great caution, they introduced Aspen back into the enclosure for short, supervised visits. To everyone's amazement, Maxine immediately groomed Aspen, gently nudging the kitten into the safety of her fur. The other kittens, curious but accepting, nestled close. Despite this progress, Aspen's condition remained precarious. Surgery was the only option to correct the palate deformity. The procedure, performed by a specialist from the Virginia Veterinary Teaching Hospital, was risky but successful. However, Aspen had to be isolated again to allow for healing. During recovery, the team used scent exchange techniques, swapping cloths between Aspen and Maxine's den, to maintain the bond. When the moment finally arrived to reunite them, Maxine's reaction was immediate. She groomed Aspen with the same care as before, and this time, Aspen responded with a faint, squeaky mew, the first vocalization the staff had heard from the struggling kitten. Over the following weeks, Aspen's progress was remarkable. Playful, energetic, and growing stronger by the day, the kitten defied the odds. By 3 months old, Aspen was nearly indistinguishable from its siblings, leaping through the enclosure with confidence. The extraordinary story of Maxine and Aspen caught the attention of Jessica Mills, the reserve's education coordinator. With the help of her cousin, a wildlife documentary producer, the story was filmed and aired nationwide. The public was captivated by the tale of a mother's love and the dedication of the Hillside team. Donations poured in, allowing the reserve to expand its rehabilitation efforts. One evening, as Brian and Ethan observed Maxine curled protectively around her 5 thriving kittens, Ethan remarked, "I keep thinking about how close we came to losing Aspen." Brian nodded. In the wild, Aspen wouldn't have survived. But here, we didn't override nature, we supported it. And nature did the rest. At that moment, Maxine opened her amber eyes and blinked slowly at them, a feline gesture of trust and contentment. Then, surrounded by her miraculous litter, she drifted back into peaceful slumber, her family safe beside her. And in that quiet moment, beneath the canopy of the Blue Ridge Mountains, it was clear that love, resilience, and a little bit of human compassion had made all the difference. The story of Maxine and Aspen is more than just a tale of survival, it is a profound lesson in resilience, compassion, and the power of intervention at the right moment. Maxine, despite her traumatic past, displayed unconditional love and care for her offspring, proving that nurture and instinct can transcend even the harshest circumstances. When Aspen was born with a life-threatening defect, the natural course of survival would have deemed the kitten too weak to live. However, thanks to the dedication and expertise of the Hillside Reserve staff, Aspen was given a second chance. This highlights an important truth: while nature is often unforgiving, human compassion and responsible intervention can tip the scales toward hope. The story also teaches us that perseverance and faith can overcome great odds. Aspen not only survived but thrived, integrating back into the litter and growing stronger each day. Similarly, in our own lives, challenges may seem insurmountable, but with patience, support, and belief in our potential, we can rise above them. Whether in family, work, or personal struggles, what truly matters is not avoiding hardships but facing them with resilience and kindness. Just as Aspen's survival was a blend of nature and nurture, so too can our greatest successes come from the balance between self-reliance and the support of those who believe in us.